50,000 people show up in Denver, Colorado over the weekend to see Bernie Sanders. It's an overflow crowd. So now maybe you should tweet me at Ed Show and tell me how he can't win. Obama never got these kind of crowds this early in the process. When do we call this a movement? Good to have you with us here on this Monday edition of the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast. Brought to you by Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, Bio Green Clean, and the iSave team. We started out on a Monday with brand new polling on the Republican side. NBC News Wall Street Journal says Bush is at 22%. Walker at 17%, Rubio at 14%, Ben Carson at 11%, and Huckabee is at 9%. And they're all weighing in on the South Carolina Confederate flag issue in the wake of the shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. Bush, Rubio, and Walker all say that once the mourning is done and the story's over, that there's no doubt that South Carolina will make the right decision. Really? What's the right decision? The Republican Party just seems to have a hard time with this across the board. Let's start with the mayor of Charleston, South Carolina. What does he think of the flag?
But certainly the Confederate battle flag that was once atop the state capitol. I led a 110-mile march to Columbia. I walked it to get the flag off the dome. It was the state, American flag, state flag, Confederate. We got it down, then the legislature to compromise, put it in front of the Capitol. And that needs to go to a museum. It sends at best mixed messages and at worst for people, hateful people like Ruth, it's an affirmation because they have appropriated something and used it as a symbol of hatred. So I think that needs to go into a museum, and I think it will.
The president saying the same thing. So the bottom line here is that this isn't anything new to South Carolina. They've been down this road before. Speaking of roads, the man you just heard from led a 100-mile march to the state legislature trying to get this changed. So they came up with a compromise, and Jim Clyburn, the congressman of over 50 years in Washington, D.C., from South Carolina, explains this compromise.
If they had followed the compromise, we would not be here. The compromise was to put that flag in front of the Wade Hampton office building next to the Wade Hampton statue. What happened was when some people rejected the compromise, the legislature, out of defiance, put that flag where it is today in front of the State House.
Right.
That is not what the compromise was. The compromise was to put it on the backside of the State House, out of public view, right, so it would not have any appearance of sovereignty. And that's not what the legislature did.
So it seems to me that the white power struggle in the legislature in South Carolina is defiant, and there isn't a compromise that they're going to go along with. And it turns out that they've had this conversation before, and they're not going to change it anytime soon. President Obama doing his first podcast with a comedian, Mark Maron, in Los Angeles, uses the N-word.
The legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination in almost every institution of our lives, that casts a long shadow. And that's still part of our DNA. That's passed on. We're not cured of it. Racism. We are not cured of.
Clearly.
And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say public. That's not the measure of whether racism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination. Societies don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 to 300 years prior.
So in the wake of South Carolina, we have a brand new discussion, refresher course on the N-word, on what is societally acceptable, the Confederate flag, where political parties and candidates stand, and, oh, by the way, what we as a country are going to do about it. And then there's the gun debate. Then there's Senator Ted Cruz on the campaign trail in Iowa saying this.
We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms. You know, the great
great thing about the state of Iowa. I'm pretty sure y'all define gun control the same way we do in Texas. Hitting what you aim at.
What is it with these Texas guys? Over the weekend, former Governor Rick Perry of Texas referred to South Carolina shooting as an accident. The conversation continues with Jonathan Alter, author, MSNBC political analyst, right after this. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegotit.com, or go to biogreenclean.com, www.biogreenclean, and order today.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringoffireradio.com.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSafe team bring you this podcast on this Monday. As we are now officially watching the days get shorter. Yesterday, the longest day of the year. You can follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. Hope you had a great Father's Day. So the conversation about the Confederate flag, is it going to intensify now that we're going into a big election cycle of 2016? Bush, Rubio, and Walker, the three frontrunners by NBC News, Wall Street Journal poll, say that, well, South Carolina will do the right thing. What is the right thing? Jonathan Alter, author, MSNBC political analyst and columnist of the Daily Beast, and author of The Center Holds, Obama and His Enemies. Jonathan, good to have you with us.
How are you, Ed?
Good. The Confederate flag debate, where does it go from here? What impact does it have politically, if any, on any of these 2016 campaigns?
Well, I think what it's going to do is put these Republican candidates in a little bit of a vice, because they're now, most of them are on record saying, well, this is up to, people in South Carolina, the South Carolina legislature, where there's a bill introduced by a Republican legislator who was a friend of some of the parishioners who were killed, to remove the flag from Capitol grounds. But that bill is not going to come up until January, when the South Carolina legislature reconvenes, and that is right before all the primaries. So South Carolina is not going to resolve this for months, which means months of squirming by these Republican candidates who have taken refuge in what can only be described as a states' rights argument, on something that is that is really a moral argument.
Exactly. That's the thing. What's the moral component here that would draw someone who wants to lead the country into making a decision? When they say that, well, the state's going to do the right thing. Bush, Walker, and Rubio all saying they're the top front runners now. The latest poll, they say, well, South Carolina's going to do the right thing. We still come back to, well, there's a moral component here. Everybody talks about that. But they just cannot take a position on, okay, this is what South Carolina should do. Why can't they bring themselves to that?
Because they want the racist vote. Let's be honest about it. The racists in South Carolina vote in the Republican primary to the extent that they vote. And, so that's what they're concerned about. Now, 15 years ago, John McCain took this position when he was running against George W. Bush in the South Carolina primary in 2000. And not long after that election, he went back to South Carolina and he gave a speech, and he said this many times publicly, that this was the lowest moment of his career, that he was gutless in addressing this issue. And he said that he would never violate his principles again, his moral principles again, by being so gutless. And we can debate whether on immigration he might have descended into that again a little bit. But in any event, at least at that point, McCain took the right principled position. And it's really pretty disturbing that, all these years later, these guys are still pandering to the racist vote, despite this immense tragedy.
If there's anyone who should have a moral compass, it's the former preacher, and that is former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. Cut 9 on the big list. This is the way he dances around this Confederate flag issue.
If the state government of South Carolina wishes to address an issue in their state, that's fine. But Chuck, if you can point me to an article and section of the Constitution in which a United States president ought to weigh in on what states use as symbols, then please refresh my memory on that. But for those of us running for president, everyone's being baited with this question as if somehow that has anything to do whatsoever with running for president. And my position is it most certainly does not.
Would
People
you ever fly the
want
flag?
their president to be focused on the economy, keeping America safe, some really big issues for the nation. I don't think they want us to weigh in on every little issue in all 50 states that might be an important issue to the people of those states, but it's not on the desk of the president.
Well, the interesting thing here is that there is a history with the Confederate flag, and other states have made decisions on whether to fly the flag on their state grounds. Is it a baited question? I mean, it seems to me it's a moral component that goes into the judgment of who we want to lead the country. Jonathan?
Of course. I mean, that was a truly pathetic answer. I mean, the idea that, the president, he doesn't have anything to do with moral leadership. The president, he just deals with national issues and is never expected to weigh in on anything that happens in a particular state or any debate that's going on in a particular area. We expect our presidents to weigh in on everything. And if any of these guys is elected president of the United States, he, or in the case of Hillary Clinton or Carly Fiorina, she, will be expected to take positions on any number of issues. You can't hide. It's a political and now a moral cowardice that's at issue, and they need to get right with this. But I think they're now dug into this position, which is not going to hurt any of them in the South Carolina primary. The primary voters probably want them to butt out, the Republican primary voters. That's why they're taking this weasel position. The problem that they have is that the United States has now twice elected an African American president of the United States. Many Americans have made the decision that this is part of a shameful past in our country, this legacy of racism. They are not going to look favorably, and these, I'm talking now about independent voters or people who might be tempted to vote for the Republican candidate in November of 2016. They are not going to look favorably on weasel Republicans who, at a moment of moral decision, took a position of equivocation and cowardice. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it is potentially a considerable problem for these Republicans. Now, what's likely to happen is that in January, I actually do think that the South Carolina legislature is going to come under such pressure that they're going to remove that flag, and so these candidates are going to think, all right, okay, I'm past this. South Carolina legislature did the right thing. This is yesterday's issue, and to a certain extent, they're right, because there's 10 or 11 months before the general election. But there are quite a number of voters who will form an impression of these guys in this period that might be a little bit hard for them to shake in a general election.
Jonathan Alter with us, MSNBC political analyst, author. Your quick couple more things I want to talk to you about. Your quick take on the most recent polling. Is this now Bush's to lose? I know it's way, way early. He's at 22%, Walker at 17%, Rubio at 14%. I'm not quite sure Walker and Rubio are going to be able to raise the Bush money. What do you make of this number here?
Well, first of all, there was a good article in the New York Times yesterday, which is consistent with what I learned when I was researching my last book, which is that polling is pretty much worthless nowadays. certainly when you're talking about gaps of, under 5 points, cell phones are often not polled. Many young people don't have landlines. Everything is messed up in polling. So I at this point, I think it is grossly premature to say that it's Bush's to lose. This thing is wide open in a way that I haven't seen in decades of covering politics. And so, anybody who gets ahead of themselves on handicapping this is making a big mistake.
Would you term the Democratic race as wide open? Bernie Sanders getting crowds that Obama never got at this time in the political cycle back in 2007. Overflow crowd of over 5,000 in Denver over the weekend. What do you make of it?
Well, it's not wide open because, as I said, if you're talking about like 5-point margins in the polls, those are not significant. But if you're talking about 30-point margins, those are. So this is still Hillary Clinton's to lose on the Democratic side. However, the amount of enthusiasm that we're seeing for Bernie Sanders is striking, important, and I think there's a very reasonable chance that he will win some primaries and caucuses, even if he doesn't go on to win the nomination.
Jonathan Alter, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, great talking to you, Ed.
Thanks so much. This is the Ed Schultz Internet Broadcast. Now this. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz Podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at WeGotEd.com.
Follow me on Twitter at Ed Show. The Ed Show tonight on MSNBC, 5 o'clock Eastern. We had an Ed Team crew in Denver over the weekend. Full report on just who these 5,000 people are that coming out listening to Bernie Sanders. Is it income inequality? Is it big money in politics? That's what he's talking about on the campaign trail, and it's drawing record crowds. All right, Trans Promotional Authority. Will the president get it? The Senate takes it up this week. Mitch McConnell says that he thinks he can get it done by separating TPA, Trans Promotional Authority, Trade Agreement Authority for the president, without TAA, which is Trade Adjustment Assistance, which is a big fund of money that goes to American workers who are displaced so they can go get retrained and get back in the economy. There's two issues here that have been meshed together that don't fly in one vote. So they're going to separate them out. So Fast Track, which is TPA, it looks like the president, obviously he has it in the House. Where's the Senate going to go? So the question is, are these 5 Democrats, the 2 senators from Delaware, Carper and Coons, Senator Warner from Virginia, Heitkamp from North Dakota, and Cantwell from Washington. These are the 5 to pay attention to. Because if they don't believe the Republicans that they're going to come back and do TAA, Fast Track could be denied, and it will never get out of the Senate, which, of course, would hinder the process of the Trans-Promotional Partnership, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the big trade agreement that the president has wanted all along, which the unions are against. So the wheel continues to turn on trade in our government minutia system. It's in the Senate this week. Let's see if they get it done. We'll have full coverage tonight on the Ed Show. Communication Workers of America, fabulous website. They have all kinds of information about this, cwa-union.org. CWA, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSafe team bring you this podcast. We'll see you tonight, and we're back tomorrow.